Hello friends, and welcome to this video. I'm honored to be sitting here today with my good friend John. John is a life coach in Asheville, and he has a new podcast called Man Made that we're actually set up to record the interview for right now. And it seemed like a good idea to create a video for this too, so you could watch, something different. Here we are. So it's a great conversation. I think we got into some really fun and some edgy and vulnerable stuff too. Thank you for all the questions.
For sure, man. Thanks for being such an awesome person to interview.
Awesome to be here with you. And without further ado, let's cut to the interview.
Hey everyone, my name is John, and today we have a very special episode of Man Made. I'm going to be talking to my good friend and sexual mastery coach, Taylor Clark Johnson. Taylor, how are you doing today?
Great. I'm great. Thanks for being here.
I'm grateful to be here with you. We're in your apartment right now, and we're going to talk about sex and how to have more meaningful connections through sex, and hopefully touch on some taboo things that most people don't talk about in order to bring a greater understanding to the men listening to this podcast.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's what I talk about all day long. That's what I love talking about. That's what all these books are about.
So I'm curious, what got you into this? What got you into talking about sex for a living to other men?
Yeah. Well, really the long story short is that I wish I had somebody talking to me about sex 10 years ago. When I was younger, when I was really struggling with the stuff that I was struggling with, premature ejaculation and crazy amounts of sexual anxiety and not being sure how to make love with my girlfriend in a really good way, and I was addicted to porn, and I just had all these bad sexual habits, and there was nobody in my life that was like, hey, maybe you want to try this thing, maybe you want to try doing this a little bit differently. Have you thought about not doing this? And so there's, that's the short answer. It's I'm the person who I wish I would have had, and in that is the longer answer, which is basically I struggled a lot, and so I researched a lot to try to overcome my own challenges and issues, and experimented a ton, and learned how porn was negatively impacting my life through a lot of trial and error, and learned how to overcome premature ejaculation through a lot of trial and error and a ton of different books. And eventually I realized I was so excited about talking about this stuff that my other career, I had been a full-time professional photographer for 8 years in the commercial business world, and I didn't have any books about it. I didn't love talking about it. All the books on my bookshelf were about sex and relationship and energy and all this stuff. And eventually it just hit me hey, probably other people want to talk about this too. More in depth than me and just my friends shooting the shit, there's people who could actually benefit from this kind of stuff. And I noticed that my friends started to come to me with questions, and I started to be the guy at parties where people would come and tell their wild ejaculation stories, or their wild sexual escapades, and then they'd always say something like, is that normal? Is this okay? Is this wrong? What's up? And it just progressed from there. And eventually I got really tired of doing photo shoots for companies that I didn't believe in their mission, and I wanted to create a difference in the world, and I wanted to have an impact that was meaningful for me.
A lot of times with my clients, I ask them, I say, hey, let me ask you a question. Has your dad ever just sat with you and said hey, so you have a dick, it's a pretty important organ on you, and I'm going to talk to you about it and my own experience with it. Yeah. And I've had hundreds and hundreds of clients, and it's always a no. And of course, my dad never had this conversation with me, and I'm pretty sure your dad never had it with you. And so I appreciate you being that guy who's all right, I'll talk about what your dick is and what it does, because it's an important thing for us men to talk about, because we spend a lot of time thinking about this dick and what to do with it, right?
A lot of time.
Yeah. Speaking of parents, what do your parents think of your job?
What do my parents think of my job? It's funny. My mom follows me on Instagram, and she will only like or comment on something that doesn't have to do anything overtly with sex. So maybe it's an image of qigong or a cool inspirational quote, and she'll like that. But if there's anything even remotely related to sex, she won't interact with it at all. And it's just funny. But overall, they're really supportive, and they're happy that I'm doing what I'm doing. But we don't talk about it in super detail.
Right. I was going to ask you, how would you suggest a man talks to his parents about sex in a way that's connective? Yeah. Any suggestions, any ideas towards that? I know it's challenging for me to do it with my parents, for sure, to talk to them as adults. Normally I take this role on where I say, you know what, that's something that I don't really talk about
Yeah.
And I kind of talk about other things, but it would be an interesting kind of experiment to, and I think it might be potentially very connective to talk to them about this thing that we all do.
Yeah, it could be. So my first question would be, why would you want to talk to your parents about sex? Like, what would you be hoping to get from that scenario? Is it more connection? It's probably not information if you're at the point where you're in the position of initiating the sex conversation with your parents, you know. Probably it would be for more connection.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah.
And if I were to do that, I would even preface the conversation and ask them, like, hey, I noticed that I'd really, like, there's some things I'd love to talk with you about around sex, and for the sake of, you know, having a conversation with you, I'd love to just go there and feel more connected. Are you open to that? And then that like door opening question, if they say yes, then boom, you know, it's a lot easier from that point. But I wouldn't just go in and be like, hey, so the other day I was having sex with my girlfriend and I got this cramp in my abdomen. And my parents would be like, hold on.
He's spying on me during my sex life. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, of course. I've got hidden cameras outside your bedroom.
So speaking of cameras, let me ask you, what's your take on porn? Because what I see in our society, talking to a lot of people, I'm a pretty curious person, as you know, is many people and many men watch porn at least on the weekly. And I'm curious your take on that. Yeah.
Oh, porn is a huge topic. And my opinion is that porn isn't inherently bad or good. It's just a thing. You know, like this teacup that I'm holding in my hand right now, it's just a teacup. I could throw it at you and it would hurt, or I could drink tea out of it, you know? And so I did have an addictive relationship to porn. I would say that I was addicted to porn in the past, and I think that's a problem. And I think porn it's super risky territory to go into, because as men, we're wired, you know, our visual system is so intricately wired with our sexual response system that it just like catches us and it pulls us in, and it's so easy to get hooked and go to the next video and go to the next video, and all of a sudden you're like looking up some weird shit that you never thought you'd be looking at 20 minutes later, and then you're like, oh, what the fuck did I just do with my life? And then it just doesn't feel good, you know? So that kind of experience of porn, I'm not a huge fan of. And I've had to work to like get out of that reactionary state and change my relationship to porn. So now when I do look at porn, I make sure that it's coming from a proactive impetus or proactive inspiration, you know? So I'm not sitting there like, ooh, porn, and I have the reactive desire to go open my laptop and look at it. It's like, no, I'm going to choose to look at porn right now and then cut it and short, you know? And that level of proactivity has been really helpful for me in terms of just everything around it, you know?
Is it something you would do with a partner? Do you think men should do it with their partners? If men want to do it with their partners, how do they bring it up?
Yeah. You know, the word should, I think, is loaded with so many problems. I don't think anyone should do porn or should have anal sex or should do anything. You know, it's like, what do you want to do? If you feel excited to look at porn with your partner, great. Ask them, you know, ask them if they want to do it. Like, don't surprise them with the laptop in bed, you know, but so much of this stuff, you know, I talk about sex a lot and I run a lot of programs about sex. And usually people know how to have sex, right? You put the thing in the thing and you do the thing, right? But what it all usually comes down to, the problem areas can often be solved by communication. At least the interpersonal problems in relationship can usually be solved by communication. And so in that scenario, I would just say something like, hey baby, I want to watch some porn with you. And I want to do it because there's this idea that, well, whatever you want to do it, you know, whatever the reason is, you could present that. Like, I want to try this position with you, or I want to try this role play, and I found a really cool video of these people doing this, and I want to see how you feel about it. Would you be open to that? You know, always like, would you be open to that? And usually, if you approach somebody with excitement, then they're going to be like, yeah, of course, you know. And if they're not a yeah, then cool. Then that's a good opportunity to inquire and have a conversation. Like, okay, can you tell me what's up with that? You know, and then go deeper from there.
Cool. So, do you masturbate? How often do you masturbate? What do you observe about men? Could men masturbate better? Is there some type of knowledge that men are missing